The crystal glass shatters on the marble floor, not with a bang, but a choked gasp from the crowd. Champagne pools like spilled gold, reflecting the panicked faces frozen mid-sentence, mid-laugh. My cheek burns, a sharp, physical agony that eclipses the stunned silence descending over the room. The noise wasn't the glass, it was her hand connecting with my face. My mother-in-law, standing rigid, eyes blazing with a fury that felt ancient, primal. Around her, the opulent ballroom of the Grand Astor Hotel, rented for our engagement party, seemed to hold its breath. Her mouth is a thin, cruel line, the words she screams tearing through the stunned air. "You'll never be part of this family." The words are sharp, final, delivered with the force of a curse. My vision blurs, not just from the pain, but from the sudden, devastating impact of her hatred. Everything I thought I was building, everything I hoped this night represented, lies shattered around my feet like the glass. This isn't just an argument. This is war. Declared brutal, in front of everyone we know, everyone they know. My future husband stands beside me, a statue carved from shock, his hand half raised as if to shield me, or perhaps himself. But it's too late. The line has been drawn in spilled champagne and stinging flesh. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. It had started so differently. Just hours ago, the night was painted with possibility. The air tasted of anticipation and expensive perfume. I remember smoothing the silk of my dress, the nervous flutter in my stomach that felt more like excitement than dread. We were celebrating. We were getting married. He, with his quiet strength and unexpected humor, the man who somehow saw through my carefully constructed walls. Me, finally allowing myself to believe in a future that wasn't a solo expedition. His family, well, that was always the complex variable. He came from old money, generations steeped in tradition and industry. His father, a man of few words but immense presence, built their company into a regional powerhouse. His mother, Eleanor, was the gatekeeper, the silent architect of their social standing. From the moment I met her, I felt scrutinized, weighed, and found wanting. Not overtly, not at first. Just a cool gaze that lingered too long, a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes, questions that felt more like interrogations veiled in concern. "Is your family in business?" she'd asked once, the implication hanging heavy in the air. My family wasn't old money. My father was a first-generation success story, a man who built his empire from the ground up, sector by sector, with a relentless pragmatism that sometimes bordered on ruthless. We were comfortable, more than comfortable, but we lacked the lineage, the polish Eleanor clearly valued above all else. I tried. God, I tried. I read books on etiquette I didn't need, researched their family history, memorized names of distant cousins and their convoluted connections. I practiced my smile until my cheeks ached. I thought if I showed respect, intelligence, and a genuine desire to fit in, she would eventually soften. She wouldn't see a threat. She'd see a partner for her son, someone who could navigate the complexities of their world alongside him. I was naive. Hopelessly, painfully naive. The party was her territory. Every guest seemed to know her better than they knew her son, certainly better than they knew me. They swirled around her, a constellation of privilege and old alliances. I felt like an alien observer, smiling and nodding, trying to anchor myself to my fiancé's side. He was a lifeline, introducing me with pride, his hand a warm weight on my back. But even he seemed slightly diminished in his mother's orbit, a son seeking approval he rarely received. The tension in the air wasn't a sudden storm. It was a slow, creeping fog. Conversations would pause when I approached. Laughter felt brittle. There were microaggressions, tiny cuts that were easy to dismiss individually, but together bled a steady discomfort. A comment about my dress being bold, a raised eyebrow when I mentioned my own career aspirations, a pointed question about my family's holiday traditions that made ours sound provincial. I tried to rise above it. I smiled wider. I spoke less, listened more. I reminded myself this was their way, their culture. I told myself Eleanor was just protective of her son, that given time, she'd see I wasn't going to take him away, but build a life with him. The champagne flowed. The music played. The room grew warmer, louder. My father was there, a solid, reassuring presence across the room. He was talking to a group of what looked like businessmen, his head tilted, listening intently. My mother was nearby, circulating with easy grace, seemingly unfazed by the undercurrents I felt so acutely. They were my anchors in this sea of polished strangers. The confrontation didn't begin with a bang either. It started quietly, Eleanor cornering me by the ornate fireplace. Her smile was tight, fixed. Her eyes were cold. "Having fun?" she asked, the question dripping with insincerity. "Yes, thank you, Eleanor." "It's a beautiful party," I replied, trying to keep my voice light, gracious. "Beautiful for you." Perhaps her voice was low, cutting. "You seem to be enjoying yourself." I blinked, unsure how to respond. "We are celebrating our engagement."
"Yes."
A celebration I confess I find premature. My stomach clenched. "Premature? We've been together for 3 years. We're in love." She scoffed, a delicate, chilling sound. "Love is complicated. It rarely exists in a vacuum. A marriage is an alliance, a merging of families, of histories, of fortunes." The implication was stark. My fortune, my history, my family wasn't up to par. This wasn't about love for her. It was a transaction, and I was poor currency. "We believe in each other," I said, my voice trembling slightly despite my best efforts. "That's what matters, does it?" She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Or does what matters depend on who you ask? My son is a kind man. Too kind, perhaps. He sees what he wants to see. He doesn't see the calculation, the ambition." The word hung in the air between us. Ambition. Was that what she thought? That I was marrying her son for his money, his status? The insult was like a physical blow, landing squarely in my chest. "That's not fair," I whispered back, my own carefully constructed composure beginning to crack. "I love him. That's it." "Please," her smile widened into a condescending sneer. "Don't insult my intelligence. Or your own. This isn't a fairy tale. It's the real world. And in the real world, people like you claw their way up, using whoever they can find. People like you." The phrase echoed, loaded with classism and contempt. My roots, my upbringing, my hard work to get where I was, all dismissed, weaponized against me. My face felt hot. My hands were shaking. My fiancé was on the other side of the room, talking to guests. I was alone with her venom. "I built my own career," I said, my voice gaining strength, fueled by indignation. "I don't need anyone's money. Don't you?" Her eyes narrowed, cold and assessing. "Or do you just need the access? The name? The entry into circles you could never reach on your own?" She paused, a cruel satisfaction dawning on her face. "Let me be clear. I see what you are. And you are not one of us. You will never be one of us." The words were a final, definitive judgment. It wasn't just an opinion. It was a declaration of war, a line in the sand drawn with chilling certainty. My carefully constructed hopes of integration, of acceptance, crumbled into dust. It was over before it began. My throat tightened. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of her. I opened my mouth to respond, to defend myself, to perhaps even walk away and find my fiancé, but she didn't give me the chance. Perhaps it was the look in my eyes, the defiance she saw instead of the capitulation she expected. Perhaps the champagne, combined with her festering resentment, finally boiled over. Whatever it was, the switch flipped. Her face contorted with rage. The controlled mask shattered, revealing the raw fury beneath. Her hand flew up, powered by a lifetime of entitlement and unchecked anger. And then the slap. The sound wasn't loud over the party noise, but it echoed in my ears. It wasn't just a slap. It felt like a physical manifestation of her hatred, a forceful expulsion of her rejection. My head snapped back. The world tilted. My cheek stung with searing heat, throbbing instantly. My hand flew up to cover it, but it was too late. Everyone had seen. The conversations died. The music seemed to fade. And then she screamed it again, louder this time, ensuring everyone heard, confirming her total, public rejection. "You'll never be part of this family." The silence that followed was deafening. It stretched, thick and suffocating. Every eye in the room was on us. I felt exposed, humiliated, the raw, ugly wound of the slap a beacon for their stares. My fiancé finally reached me, his face pale, aghast. He started to say my name, his voice a strangled whisper. Eleanor stood there, chest heaving, eyes still fixed on me with that same burning intensity. She had done it. She had made her statement.
Publicly.
Irreversibly. She had chosen humiliation as her weapon, striking me down in front of the very people whose acceptance I had craved. All my efforts, all my hopes, reduced to this stinging cheek, this public shaming.
It felt like the end.
Not just of the party, but of everything. How could we possibly recover from this? The air was thick with awkwardness and the collective intake of breath from 100 witnesses. And then a voice.
Calm.
Measured. Cutting through the stunned silence like a surgeon's scalpel. It was my father. He had made his way through the frozen crowd, his expression unreadable. He wasn't looking at Eleanor or me or my fiancé. He was looking at Eleanor's husband, the patriarch of the family, who stood a few feet away, his face a mask of bewildered horror. My father held a small, leather-bound notebook in one hand, a pen in the other. He didn't raise his voice, but the authority in it compelled every single person in the room to listen. "Mr. Sterling," my father said, his voice carrying clearly in the unnatural quiet. Sterling. That was the family name. We seemed to have reached an impasse. Eleanor, still caught in her fury, turned slightly towards him, her chest still heaving. "This is a family matter," she spat, her voice hoarse. My father gave a slow, almost imperceptible shake of his head. "On the contrary, Eleanor. This concerns the very foundation of your family, your legacy." He paused, letting the words sink in. The little notebook seemed to hum with unseen power. He wasn't looking at her face, still red with rage, but at her husband, the man who controlled the family business, the source of their status, their wealth, their perceived superiority. "You see," my father continued, his tone conversational, as if discussing the weather, "for some time now my team has been exploring expansion opportunities. Various sectors, various markets. Your family's company, Sterling Holdings. It's a fine old institution. Stable. Established. Exactly the kind of foundation we appreciate." A ripple went through the crowd. Whispers started, low and urgent. Sterling Holdings. The bedrock of their family's identity. Eleanor's face, minutes ago blazing with fury, began to drain of color. Her husband, Mr. Sterling, stared at my father, his eyes wide with dawning horror. This wasn't making sense. What was my father talking about? My father opened the notebook. "Our offer," he said, his voice steady, "was submitted discreetly, as requested. A generous offer, reflecting our assessment of the company's long-term potential. We finalized the details just this evening." He glanced up from the notebook, his gaze finally settling on Eleanor, then sweeping across the stunned faces of the Sterling family and their friends. There was no triumph in his expression, just a cold, businesslike finality. "Consider this," my father said, his voice dropping slightly, "our formal acceptance of your counteroffer. Given the sudden and rather public change in the nature of our potential alliance, symbolized so eloquently here tonight," he gestured subtly towards me and my throbbing cheek. "We decided to proceed without further delay. The papers were signed digitally less than 10 minutes ago." He paused again, letting the bomb drop fully. Signed digitally. 10 minutes ago. While Eleanor was busy tearing my world apart, my father was calmly dismantling hers. As of 10:17 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, my father stated, closing the notebook with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room, Sterling Holdings is now a wholly owned subsidiary of my company. The words hung in the air, heavy with impossible reality. Sterling Holdings. Theirs.
Bought.
Acquired. By my father. The man whose daughter was just deemed unworthy, unwelcome. The man from the family that wasn't good enough. He hadn't just offended me, he had delivered a strategic strike of devastating proportions. This wasn't just karma, this was a full-scale corporate takeover executed on a personal battlefield. Eleanor stared at him, her eyes wide and unblinking, like a startled animal. The color had completely left her face, replaced by a ghastly, ashen gray. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The air seemed to thicken around her. The proud, imposing figure she had been just moments before seemed to shrink, to wilt. Her husband staggered back, bumping into a waiter carrying a tray of glasses. The glasses rattled, but none fell. He muttered something incoherent, staring at my father with disbelief and naked fear. And then, Eleanor began to tremble. Not a small tremor, but a violent shaking that started in her hands and quickly consumed her entire body. Her eyes rolled back slightly in her head. A strange, gurgling sound came from her throat. Her knees buckled. She didn't just faint, she collapsed. A sudden, boneless heap on the expensive carpet, her carefully coiffed hair splayed around her face, her designer dress pooling around her inert form. The force of her collapse sent a fresh ripple of shock through the crowd.
People gasped.
Someone screamed. The picture of elegant fury was instantly replaced by a frail, unconscious woman lying prone at my feet. Chaos erupted. Guests surged forward. Her husband rushed to her side, shouting her name. My fiancé, still reeling from the double shock of the slap and his mother's collapse, was torn between comforting me and rushing to his family. He hesitated for a split second, then moved towards his mother, joining his father and others kneeling around her. I stood frozen for a moment, the sting on my cheek a dull throb compared to the seismic shift that had just occurred. My father stood beside me, silent now, observing the scene with that same calm, unreadable expression. He hadn't intervened when she slapped me. He had waited. And then he had struck. Not with violence, but with overwhelming, undeniable power. He hadn't defended my honor with words. He had done it with a corporate acquisition. He had taken the very source of her pride, her family's identity, and simply bought it. In that moment, standing there with the sting on my cheek and the sight of my collapsed mother-in-law at my feet, something shifted inside me. The humiliation, the pain, the feeling of utter defeat, they didn't vanish, but they were suddenly overshadowed by a cold, hard wave of vindication. She had tried to cast me out, to declare me unworthy of their family, their world. My father had responded by acquiring their world. He hadn't just leveled the playing field, he had flipped the entire board. The paramedics arrived, their red lights flashing outside, casting eerie shadows through the ballroom windows. The party guests, moments ago a picture of sophisticated revelry, were now a huddled, murmuring mass, faces pale with shock and gossip. Eleanor was carried out on a stretcher, her face still ashen, her earlier fury a distant, impossible memory. My fiancé stayed by his mother's side, leaving with her in the ambulance. His father, looking utterly broken, stayed behind for a few minutes, speaking in low, urgent tones with my father in a corner of the now half-empty ballroom. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but the body language was clear. My father was in control. Mr. Sterling was defeated. My mother came to me then, her face etched with concern. She gently touched my still-burning cheek. "Are you all right?" she whispered. I nodded, though I wasn't sure. Physically, I was fine, just a red mark and a lingering ache. Emotionally, I felt like I had just walked through a war zone. My father joined us, his presence filling the space. He didn't ask if I was okay. He knew. He just looked at me, his eyes holding a depth of understanding I hadn't seen before. He hadn't needed to ask if the slap hurt, or if her words cut deep. He had seen her contempt, felt her rejection radiating across the room. And he had responded in the only way he knew how, by removing the ground she stood on. She made a mistake, my father said, his voice low, meant only for us. She mistook pride for power. And she underestimated us.
Us.
Not just him.
Us. Me.
Our family. He saw her attack on me as an attack on everything we were. And he had responded with a force that annihilated her position. The aftermath wasn't immediate or clean. The engagement party dissolved into bewildered silence and hurried departures. The air was thick with rumor and speculation. The news of the acquisition spread like wildfire through the city's business circles, becoming the subject of shocked whispers and frantic phone calls. My fiancé called me later that night from the hospital. His voice was strained, weary. Eleanor was stable, recovering, but the shock had taken a toll. They were running tests. He apologized for his mother's actions, his words hollow with the weight of the evening. He apologized for not stopping her sooner. I told him it wasn't his fault. But a tiny, cold part of me wondered if that was entirely true. He had stood there, frozen, for crucial seconds. And while his mother's collapse was dramatic, it was the news of the buyout that had truly devastated her. The following weeks were a blur of legal proceedings, hushed conversations, and the quiet disintegration of the Sterling family's public facade. My father's company took over Sterling Holdings swiftly and efficiently. Board members were replaced, strategies shifted. The business that had been the source of Eleanor's power and pride was now run by my father's appointees. It was a total, undeniable victory. Eleanor remained, for a time, out of the public eye, recovering. Her husband faced the fallout of the acquisition, his authority diminished, his legacy redefined. The old guard of the city watched, fascinated and appalled, as one of their own was systematically taken apart by an outsider. My relationship with my fiancé became a tightrope walk. How do you navigate a future with someone whose mother publicly humiliated you and whose family's entire world was then bought out by your father in retaliation? He was caught between his loyalty to his family and his love for me. He didn't blame my father. He understood the business logic, the cold, strategic response to a direct provocation. But the emotional cost was immense. His home felt different. His family dynamic was irrevocably altered. We talked for hours, dissecting the night, the years leading up to it, the tangled mess of family history and expectations. He admitted his mother had always been difficult, controlling, obsessed with appearances and legacy. He had hoped marriage would create distance, a new unit free from her influence. He never anticipated this level of hostility, this public attack. And he certainly never anticipated my father's response. My father. I looked at him with new eyes. He wasn't just a successful businessman. He was a protector, a strategist of the highest order. He hadn't sought revenge in the traditional sense. He had sought dominance. He had shown Eleanor and everyone else the true nature of power. It wasn't about pedigree or old money. It was about having the resources and the will to shape the world around you. The sting on my cheek faded, leaving no physical mark, but the memory was etched deep. The words, "You'll never be part of this family," no longer felt like a condemnation. They felt like a challenge I had unknowingly spectacularly met. By trying to shut me out, Eleanor had opened the door for my father to walk in and take everything. The plot twist wasn't just my father buying the company. It was the realization that her actions, her desperate, ugly attempt to maintain control and exclude me, were the direct cause of her own undoing. She had delivered the catalyst for her family's fall from grace. She hadn't just slapped me. She had signed the death warrant for her legacy.
There was a cold satisfaction in that.
A deep, quiet triumph that settled in my bones. I hadn't fought back with words or tears at that moment. I hadn't needed to. My father had fought for me, not with fists, but with spreadsheets and acquisition papers. But victory, even one this absolute, doesn't come without a price. The relationship with my fiancé was forever marked by that night. We loved each other, yes, But could we build a life on the ruins of his family's empire, orchestrated by my own? The dynamics were twisted, complex. His mother would never fully recover, her humiliation a constant, silent presence. His father carried the burden of his defeat. The family structure that had seemed so formidable was revealed to be fragile, built on a foundation that could be, and was bought out from under them.
We're still together.
We didn't call off the engagement immediately. We decided to wait, to see, to navigate the wreckage. The path forward isn't clear. It's strewn with broken glass and the ghosts of a life that could have been. But I learned something important that night. I learned that family isn't just about blood or legacy or shared last names. It's about who stands with you, who defends you, not just with pretty words, but with actions that speak louder than any scream. My father, the man who built his world with grit and strategic vision, had shown me the ultimate loyalty. He had turned her weapon of exclusion into the instrument of her downfall. I am still me, still the person she deemed unworthy. But I walk with a different posture now. Straighter, stronger. I am not part of her family, that much is true. But she is, in a strange, twisted way, a part of my story now. The woman who slapped me, who tried to erase me, and whose world crumbled when my father decided that my place wasn't up for negotiation. It was simply going to be taken. The legacy she fought so desperately to protect is now controlled by the family she tried to keep out. The irony is a sharp, persistent taste in my mouth. It's not a happy ending, not exactly. It's something more complicated, more real. It's a testament to the fact that sometimes the quiet ones, the outsiders, the ones you underestimate, hold the most power of all. And sometimes the greatest battles are won not with emotion, but with cold, hard business. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.